Hello, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, episode 409, recorded live Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. And Shane, keeping in our tradition, something that you thought of but thought about too late was we are in the 400s, so we are in the HTTP code section here. And this week's code 409, conflict. So let's hope we do not do it proud.
Well, what's really interesting, though, is I think that our overarching theme of this episode fits in perfectly, right? We're like, what best represents conflict? And we decided the Christmas holiday represented conflict better than anything else. So if you're not watching live, you do not appreciate the fact that Todd and I have both donned our Santa hats. I have donned my Santa onesie as well. I'm full.
Yep.
Todd has got a grandma sweater on. That,
Yeah. Yep.
Right? That's another way to explain it than a grandma
No,
sweater.
it's perfect. Though we've also described it as your aunt, something that your aunt would wear. So somebody gave me this sweatshirt, and that's what Jill said. She's like, that's something like your aunt would wear. I'm like, my aunt must have good taste. That's
Yeah, well, and of course it's the aunt that has a bunch of cats, but I realize that's kind of a touchy subject in the show. So,
we don't want to go there. Split the audience in half.
but yeah, so Todd, I mean, we're behind though, right? I mean,
Right.
I realize people are like look at the calendar, go, it's November 7th. You guys are talking about Halloween. We're talking about Christmas.
Yeah.
And we're like a month behind already. I mean, I thought we were scooping the rest of the world, but I have gotten Black Friday sale ads. I've seen it
yeah.
in the stores. I've seen Christmas lights up in people's houses.
Yeah. Yeah. The local Sam's Club around here has had Christmas things out for over a month. It was the month of September when I first saw them here. So yeah, you and I are woefully behind. We should be getting drunk for St. Patrick's Day this week. I think that's where the holiday we're celebrating is now. I think that's the thing.
You know what? I think that's gonna be our goal. We're gonna celebrate. Let's celebrate Valentine's Day, like January 2nd. Let's see if we can get ahead of one of these holidays and be the first.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I was ashamed. And again, if you don't watch the show live or you don't get the video, man, make this week be the week that you do it. At least go out. If you go to toddclint.com/podcast409, you can get the links. There'll be a screenshot there. But yeah, Shane and I are in our Christmas best. We both decorated our offices. Again, way, way behind the curve on all this. We apologize to everybody. But yeah, it's Christmas. And I've always been one of those people that has been a purist on this and said, I don't want to hear anything Christmas until after Thanksgiving. That, though, once you get kids, that kind of goes out the window. And you and I have talked about all these things. When I first started having kids, I laid down a bunch of proclamations. My kids won't be this, and I won't do this and this. And I think without exception, every one of those has gone out the window immediately. And this is another one.
I know, and I can't wait for the one. My daughters will never date your boys. That's gonna be the best day ever.
That's true. That is one that I have stuck firm to. I don't know that my daughters even know that you have offspring. I think that's just a secret we're gonna have to keep. But now we get kids, and then as Thanksgiving moves, sometimes it's late in November, so then that window between Thanksgiving and Christmas gets even smaller, and so here we are.
Yeah, well, and so looking at your great festive decorations on your wall, I noticed that they all surround that lovely piece of paper that you did for Siskit.
Well, I thought you were going to mention the mistletoe here.
Oh, no, I was not going to talk about the mistletoe. I did not want to make that awkward. Hey, he pointed the Siskit sign on the first try this week, folks.
Well, I know where it is, so I know it's over my right shoulder, so I can't look at the picture, but I know, it's right there. Yep. And
But yeah, so maybe when you finally get that print out, maybe you just go ahead and do like a holiday flavor of that. Do not put it anywhere near the mistletoe, though. I'm certain the folks at Siskit do not want to kiss you under the mistletoe. So
yeah, I don't know. They're pretty nice people. I'm going to be there in a month. So like a month from today, I'm going to be there. So I'm in Zagreb. I'm pretty excited about that.
very cool.
Oh, so speaking of them, and we talk about them a lot. Over the last week, I've been talking to different customers about doing migrations and things like that. And there has been 2 occasions where customers have wanted a report on this or that. Things about like Office 365 group membership, or if somebody who has left the company is sharing something in OneDrive, things like that. All these housekeeping things that there's just no good way to get inside of Office 365 or SharePoint. And they have come up with numerous, and I'll be honest, I kind of forgot about it too. We've come up with numerous PowerShell things and stuff like that. And then I'm like, hey, wait, Syskit Security Manager does all this. It gives you all these reports. If only there was somebody who could tell you about it. So if you've got some of these management issues with Office 365 and discovery and finding things, check out Syskit Security Manager. You can go to syskit.com. They've got a free download, and check it out and see if it gives you the information that you want.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's looking at the notes this week. Apparently, you've been a busy boy. Right? You got a real job last week, and all of a sudden now, I mean, the notes are just littered with all these like actual valuable topics instead of our usual banter. So I'm kind of sad a little about that, but
yeah, well, I'm sure we will find a way to screw it up. We are consistent in our poor performance, so I have every faith in us that will be the case. But yeah, it's been a busy week, both for Office 365 and for me and for you. You've been ignoring my IM, so I can only imagine that means that you're very busy. That's what I tell myself.
Yep. Good.
I even went out and badmouthed you on Reddit last night, so I felt good about that. I felt.
Yeah, you sent me that one link. I still haven't seen that one. Yeah, I am deep in the Power Apps hole, so I apologize.
Yep. So the first one I want to talk about is I blogged, and this is a blog post that I've been meaning to write for a while. I've got a OneNote that has all of my potential blog posts in it, and I've got that down to like, I don't want to look in that window. That's the show notes window. I'll never get that back if I change that one. I have got 6 more blog posts in the hopper. And this is just one that I finally got. But this is one of those, they tell you when you write blog posts or whatever, if you're going to try to publish a series of things, write them all out first before you publish the first one, because inevitably you will not get to all of them. I made that mistake. So a couple of months ago, I don't remember when it was, I published a blog post on how to navigate Office 365 identities in your browser without losing your mind, which is the whole, Chrome profiles and Firefox has profiles and all that. And that was a huge hit. Like everybody loved that. And it's one of those things that once you find it, it just changes how you use Office 365. It is just a crazy thing. When I did that blog post, the intention was, and at the time I wrote it, I had notes right next to it, how to do the same thing in PowerShell, because you and I spent a lot of time in PowerShell. There are similar techniques, but I did not mention it in that blog post because I know myself, and I know there was a, better than average chance I was never going to write that second blog post. But I did write that blog post. So you can go to toddclint.com. It is blog post number 800, but it is connecting to Office 365 with multiple accounts in PowerShell without losing your damned mind. And it is all the things that we do to do that in PowerShell.
Well, that is spectacular. And I didn't tell you, right? Because unfortunately for me, my life was changed by the Google Chrome trick. And I've had to admit it in public multiple times. That's how good it was. So this month when I wrote that monthly article for Petri.com about SharePoint news and notes you should know, I included a link to your blog post as the first item in the article. It felt dirty. I was intoxicated on adult beverages at that point. It was bad, but I had to do it because I really thought that highly of it. This PowerShell one, it's too specific. No one cares about that. But that one.
Your heart grew 3 sizes that day, I think is the.
The new Grinch movie comes out soon, right? So I'm trying to get in the mood.
That's I've lost track of how many Grinch movies there, but how many times can we tell that same story? Oh.
Well, it's the saying they keep rebooting old stuff because they can't come up with anything new. So.
Yep. So this is the PowerShell one. So basically, this is for consultants or deep IT pros that do things in PowerShell with Office 365, but have that same issue where they need to connect sometimes as a regular user because you're doing PnP things to a site collection. Sometimes as a tenant admin to do things, sometimes as a customer's tenant admin, sometimes you've got a demo tenant, like one of the tenants from demos.microsoft.com, and just keeping all that straight and typing all those passwords. I hate typing passwords. So this is some techniques to not have to do that all the time.
Very cool. Yeah, it's I gave it a read for you, and I approve of what you did there. So yeah,
excellent.
Good job.
And I wrote that one. So really, the motivation for writing that one wasn't to follow up the browser one, though that's what it did. I have another one in the hopper that I wanted to reference this one with. So that was kind of my motivation. I wanted to publish the other one because I think that's got some handy stuff, but I wanted this to reference. So hopefully in the next week or so, I'll publish the follow-up to it.
And now if I could just get you to make videos to go along with all these, your life would be so much more awesome.
Yeah, I should do that. And it's one of those things I just never imagine anybody's going to watch them. And Yeah. So in the chat room, we're talking about Christmas and all of that, and Mark Christman's asking when is the Die Hard remake, and there have been a few Die Hard remakes. So didn't The Rock just come out with one here not too long ago? I don't know if it was specifically Christmas based, but it was the one where he had the prosthetic leg or something. And then Dean Cain made one a few years ago. It was like a TV movie. And then we get into that whole thing, is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not a Christmas movie? And
That is one of the dumbest pop culture conversations ever. This whole is A, who cares? B, what is the relevance to this conversation? None. And C, of course it's not.
I don't know. That's, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know. I am not there for said conversation, but it's just one of those things that when people like have these holy wars on the Facebooks and the Twitter books, I'm like, people, really?
Yep.
Get off.
One of the interesting trivia things about Die Hard is technically a sequel. Yeah. It is. So yeah, there's two interesting things about Die Hard. I won't tell you what the sequel part is. I will. I'll let the listeners find that one out for themselves. But the other thing was that story was originally supposed to be I think an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. He was supposed to be the John McClane character, and it was right after I think Commando came out, and somebody was like, it's too exactly close to Commando, and yeah.
I don't think I ever saw Commando, to be honest. I mean, I know what it is. I know all about, but I don't think I ever sat and watched it.
It's got some super cheesy 80s action stuff in it. It's, yeah.
I really want to go back and watch Rambo First Blood or something and just see how, if it's, in my mind, it was such a good movie. I'm certain it's terrible.
Yeah, I've done that. So we've got the retro TV station. So I've been watching some stuff to see how it stand up in old movies. It's funny. Some stuff stands up. Some stuff you're just like, oh my God, what were we thinking? Yeah. So yeah, First Blood, I have not watched that one, but yeah, I remember when that one came out. That was groundbreaking. That was, yeah.
Stallone, he was just the man, right?
The quiet, reluctant. Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. What else? So I'm doing a good job of distracting us from staying on topic, which is what I'm supposed to do. But looks like Microsoft's ready to train your Office 365 users, unless...
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So I saw this story break maybe last Wednesday, after the podcast Wednesday. And I remember thinking this would be a good topic to talk about. And again, this is one of those crazy things. If you listen to the podcast or watch the podcast, it may come as a shock that we actually do prep work for this. And every week after we get on the podcast, I open up a new tab. We start pasting in links for next week's podcast. And this was one that made it. But what I couldn't do was find an official Microsoft blog post on this. But basically what all of the other people in the blogosphere were saying was that Microsoft was going to start sending Office 365 end users email with links to training and things like that, unless you went into your tenant and specifically opted out of it. And nobody, I promise you, nobody with that information would have been able to find the place where you opt out of it. You had to have, it was like a map. It was like with those pirate maps with a thing, and you got to find the W and then there's an X. And that was where this was at. But that came out on Wednesday. And everybody's like, what? This is horrible. But and I was thinking about this, and I've been doing a bunch of migrations lately, and specifically migrations for companies who are moving from file shares to Office 365.
Right.
So they've never seen a SharePoint before. They have no idea that the cog has moved back and forth like a ping pong ball.
How lucky.
They just know they used to go into Windows Explorer and all their stuff was there, and now it's on some web page, and it's all... Those folks have really needed a lot of training because it's just a complete shift. So I saw this and I'm like, that's not a horrible idea. I'll have to see what this training looks like, but that's not terrible. But I think for the most part, this new functionality was ill-received by the Microsoft community. And just a couple of days ago, Microsoft relented. They came back and they said, okay, we're not going to do that thing that we said we were going to do. And so I think it's funny. I mean, it's easy for us to make hay of it here, but I think that shows that the Microsoft we're dealing with now is not the Microsoft from 1996. The company has fundamentally changed in our careers, and this is one of them. They listen now. The arrogance, the hubris of Microsoft from the 90s is gone, I think.
Yeah, and so sending these emails is kind of along a larger strategy of the Office 365 suite as a whole, right? Is they really want it to go viral. They really want things like Power Apps or Flow or Forms to go viral within the company. So they purposely push information to end users that they probably wouldn't have in the past.
Yep.
They expose buttons that are that's a little forward Microsoft. But they also, this is where, the corporate IT people probably struggle a little bit. They don't always give us the controls that I think we're used to either.
I agree.
And that's, I think it's going to make for some awkward conversations at some point. But I can tell you when I talk to, the people that live or that work up there, they are hell bent on this plan of we are just going to continue to give, and just try and make it so you could never get rid of this platform. They don't say it that way, but that's the way I read it.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to that thing we've always heard is when Microsoft does studies on their software, Word, Excel, whatever, and they say, what features do you wish Word had? And, 80% of the features that people wish Word had have been in Word for, 2 or 3 versions. So them pushing it out is not completely malicious because it's exposing people to things that they're looking for and they want to have. But on the other hand, yeah, we don't get a lot of controls over it. And I know for a lot of customers, the approach to implementing Office 365 is a very controlled, phased approach. Whenever I do talks about Office 365, I'm like, well, you all started in email, and then you moved to SharePoint and OneDrive, and then there's a very well-known script. The problem with these emails that Microsoft sends out to everybody in the whole world is they don't know where everybody in the whole world is in that progression. And a lot of companies, they don't want to think about Power Apps and Stream and all that until they're a little farther down, and now their users are getting these emails from Microsoft saying, hey, have you seen Planner? You can do all this great stuff, and IT can't keep their hands around it.
Yeah, no, I've had 2 customers in the last 3 weeks that have had, they didn't have Flow, right? So I told them about Flow, got them all excited about Flow. I demoed Flow, and they went to click on the buttons, and they weren't there. It was like, womp, womp, womp. They tried to sign up for a trial. It's like, your IT has said no, womp, womp, womp. And, that caused legitimate frustration. And that's, I think that's what Microsoft wants, right? They want that business user to go back to IT and be like, what the heck's going on here? Why can't you provide me these features that we already own for free so I can go and dig in?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you and I have talked before that a lot of our contracts these days, the people that we're working with are not IT, they're business folks. And that is where that's coming from. And I'm mostly for that, but I certainly can see the IT side where, for Flow specifically, Flow is great functionality. Flow in and of itself is not bad. But the tools around Flow for the administrators are not the best. And I can understand why IT doesn't want that out tenant-wide while they can't get easy reports on where stuff's at and who owns it and things like that.
Yeah, and to Microsoft's credit, they've added a lot of features that are really new in that space around auditing flows and, flows that monitor for new flows and flows that monitor for new Power Apps and things. So a lot of that plumbing is now there. It's just not a happy little dashboard, that I think you're hoping for. It takes you rolling up your sleeves and learning Flow to go learn how to audit the flows, which then makes you love flows in theory, which then hopefully, makes you another viral proponent. So,
yeah, but I was, I was of 2 minds on the Microsoft thing. I was glad they were sending it. I could see why it was causing problems. And then they decided to back down on it, and I'm like, it's a crazy world we live in, and all that happened in a week. I mean, since we recorded the last podcast. So
yeah, and that's been a couple times, right? They've pivoted pretty fast when they've rolled out an announcement like that, and the world freaked out. It's taken them less than 5 days every time to be like, we heard you, stop.
Yeah, the groups, the automatic groups for every manager was the other one where
yes.
We all had our pitchforks and our torches, and we were all ready to go. And they're like, yeah, you got us.
Right, and that's also speed of information. If you think about, 10 years ago, that person didn't have a way to give that feedback to Microsoft. They would have had to call their account rep, schedule a call. That account rep would have had to have 30 of those calls before he would have called his manager with it. And it would take months for that level of feedback to make it to the product team. Now we hop on social media or Reddit, or I guess it's part of social media, but we hop somewhere.
User voice. Yeah.
Right now, people, and Microsoft reads it right now and does it. Kudos.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I'm a fan of the new Microsoft thing. And again, it's just, constantly telling people this is not the Microsoft of 20 years ago. It's a different company. Yep. Speaking of that, I saw another link that Mark Cashman put out this week on a resource center for how to build modern intranets in Office 365. This is one for folks like you and I. Our job has changed significantly in the last 5 years. We're both doing things that we would have not thought we would be doing in 5 years. And part of that is, as I'm talking to users and talking to customers, my migration job now is not, well, we've got these databases and we got to do these things with the things. Now it's, we're going to use this tool and all your data is going to show up in Office 365. But here's what we have to do when we put it up there. We need to think about groups and subsites and hubs and all of these things. And the modern pages is another part of that and the modern experience. And so I'm glad to see that Microsoft has put some more resources out there for us on how to handle all of that.
I would like to go on the record and say that I'm very sad about this particular article.
Why is that?
Because if you had read my monthly roundup where I featured you, which was very painful, this was one of the things that I point out because Mark is actually he tweets that about once a week as a new tweet. But yeah, so they've got a couple of different resource centers now. So this one is around building a modern intranet, and they've got a very similar one that's linked off of here, but it's kind of its own entity around branding and such, right? Yeah. Because we're all kind of really confused on what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And I'm certain they're going to decide that the guidance they're giving there is wrong in a month, but they're trying to come up with some of these places because they're getting a lot of these common questions like, hey, how do I do all this in a modern way? So I'm very hurt that you did not get this information from me. You got it from somewhere else.
No, well, and so the thing that you mentioned is, the retweeting of stuff is a legitimate deal. And I looked, and that article that I linked was put out on Halloween, so it was a week old. Now, it might be pointing to all the same pages, but I do.
So you know what it was? Okay, yeah, because I wrote that article on the 1st. Shh. And so it came out on the... Yes, you're right. Okay, so that one's not the yes.
Yeah, but then that's something else. When I'm king of the world, there's going to be a lot of changes. First, and you might not have this experience where you're at, but I'm going to make it illegal to answer the phone yellow. That will be the first thing when I'm king of the world. The second thing that I will do when I'm king of the world is make it a law that you can have your fingers taken away from you if you publish anything on the internet and the date that it was published is not prominently displayed without having to scroll on the page. Because there's so much coming out so quickly that gets outdated so quickly. I need to know when I see this link from Mark Cashman that it's not something from 6 months ago or a year ago. So
I support your second agenda. I do not support your first agenda. If people want to answer the phone as yellow or, what's what is the angel? What did the angel get? Halo, right?
All the Modern Family.
Exactly. Phil Dunphy isms.
Yeah.
So yes, I support the blogs must have dates.
Yeah. Everything, every blog post, every whatever should have that. And that's because, I do this kind of stuff and I don't want to link to something that's out of date, or I don't want to find something that's out of date.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I struggle with YouTube, right? Because their platform is really, right, all they care about is the PewDiePies and the rich girls of Southern California, They only care about those social media posts that are only relevant for hours, maybe days if they're lucky.
Yeah.
But so I publish content out there, and there's basically no way for me to ever go back and edit it. If I make a typo or something like that, I can't. Or if there's a new method, I want to go in and embed a flashing screen that says, don't do this. This turned out to be there's no way to do that. And it's one of my few qualms with the whole YouTube as a technical information platform.
Yep, and I get why they do it. They don't want you publishing something and then bait and switch and slipping something else in. So yeah, those videos are immutable. But I'm with you. There's been a bunch of times where I've that was a bad.
Yeah, and they used to give us the ability to go in and add annotations. So at least I could go in and put a little flashing thing on the screen and say this is bad. But the way that they did annotations didn't work on the mobile browsers. People watching makeup videos is all they care about, so they only care about mobile browsers. Yeah. It's a nasty cycle, but yeah, they need to solve it. They're not going to. There's no money in solving this problem, but I really wish they would sit down with me and another 100 technology video creators and talk about how our needs are different than the person who has trendy hats.
Yeah, I agree with that. So another big thing, and this was one of these things where with Microsoft, the way they're rolling things out, I lose track of when stuff comes out and when it doesn't. And I thought this thing was already out, but apparently it was just out in preview. But now we have the ability in Office 365, and I guess in Azure AD, so Office 365 by extension, to license things by group. So One of the things when I teach PowerShell classes with Office 365, I show all the bits and all the stuff, and then I show a sample script. And one of the things that sample script does is it creates, it takes a new user and licenses them up and then sets up a mailbox or does whatever. And licensing users is something that you always have to do. Having a user in Office 365 is not enough. They have to have their location set and they have to have a license applied to them before they can go to SharePoint or do whatever. And that was always a very manual process. But now, and again, I thought this has been out for a while, but Alex Simons posted a thing that this is now public. So now if you have a group in Azure AD, you can add a person to that group, which can all be an automated thing, and you can apply a license to that group. And so when the users, synced up, they're just licensed.
That's pretty cool. That's a
Yeah.
solid way of going at it. And that's so slightly related. I'm about to have to go down this rabbit hole a little deeper than I want.
Take a deep breath. This looks like it's going to be a big one.
Nah, it's not too bad. But so I'm starting a Power Apps project for a multinational, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so it needs to support like 7 different languages, and it needs to support, but more importantly, when the user logs in, I need to figure out what region they're from, and then, right, I have to code all that. It's not like a browser that just magically knows, oh, you're from Spain, here's a Spanish version.
Right.
And so I think all that for them is stored in Azure AD. So for me, it's going to be a new rabbit hole of trying to understand more of kind of where they're hiding information like that and how accessible that type of stuff is. So should learn some good lessons.
Yeah, I think it's just the usage location property of the user. I think that's where that's at. Because that's the thing that you have to set before you can license them. So type that down, ask me later. But yeah, I think it's going to be just that simple to pull that out.
Very good. Well, I'm very hopeful. But yeah, I don't know. Just my Mandarin is not very good, so it would be interesting how well I do at making drop-down labels for in Mandarin. So
yeah, I can't wait to see that. But whenever I talk about Office 365, I always end up going down. You talk about going down rabbit holes, going down the Azure AD rabbit hole, and just all of the great things that those people keep adding. And this is another one of them. That's they're hitting it. So thanks to those guys for knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, they are good people. Other people that knock it out of the park, the fine folks at TechSmith who make us a product called Snagit.
So this one, they are not a sponsor. They do give us Snagit and Camtasia for free since we're MVPs, but they don't pay us. They don't even know that I exist as far as I know. But I have been a big fan of Snagit and Camtasia for, man, I'm not exaggerating, 20 years probably. I don't know when Snagit first came out, but 15, 20 years ago. And I was on a call with a customer a couple of days ago, and we were talking about she's very good. Before we have these weekly meetings, and before we have these meetings, she always sends me the itinerary of the things that she wants to discuss. She's incredibly structured and good, just well organized, and I love this about her. And one of the things that she did in one of the emails was she had screenshots of the stuff that she had these questions about, which is I'm a very visual person, so that was infinitely helpful. But the screenshots were not as crisp and tight as they probably could have been.
Right.
And so I'm talking to her, and I said, and then while I was doing screen share with her on Teams, and she pulled out the old snipping tool, and I'm like, have you thought about Snagit? And she's like, I know it exists, but and I'm like, so let's take a minute here, do a small commercial for Snagit. So I popped over, started sharing my screen, and just pulled up the Snagit capture tool and the Snagit editor. And I'm like, and she is one of these people who is in IT, but she's really a business user. She's been one of these people that's really been super good about figuring in the end user experience as we've been rolling this thing out. And she ends up writing a lot of documentation and sending people a lot of screenshots and trying to make things very easy for the user. And I'm like, you got to have Snagit. I mean, you just for the easy arrows and the boxes and the ragged edges where you can. I mean, you got to have Snagit. And so I showed it to her for 3 minutes and just gushed about it. And I suspect I made a believer out of her. And so that's why I threw that in the notes this week, because I think just enough people don't know about Snagit.
Well, there you go. You can add to the list of laws. So your third law after you take over the universe would be that no one can use Snagits with a little torn pages around the edges. I wish that one feature had been removed 27 years ago. It just exhausts me. I'm like,
why do you hate that?
Because it's extra stuff that provides zero value that looks nice, but
Well, so I can tell you, I do that once in a while. And I don't do it for aesthetic purposes because obviously you've seen me dress myself any number of times. Clearly, I have no aesthetic sense whatsoever. But I always use it to show the context that the screenshot that I'm screenshotting is part of a bigger canvas of stuff, as opposed to a self-contained dialog box that has all the things. That's how I do it.
and I guess I feel like that's always just obvious because I assume if I'm showing you a screenshot that you are somehow looking at that same screen anyway, so you should.
Yeah, well, and I will absolutely admit that there are things that are obvious to most people that I completely miss. So you might be onto something. In the chat room, some people are talking about some other things. So Brett Cartwright's talking about how Windows Shift S brings up the OneNote snag tool. Big fan of OneNote. As a general rule, I have an instance of OneNote running on every monitor that I have attached to any system at any given time. I mean, I just work out of OneNote at all points. However, I don't like the snag tool because I use Snagit instead, and I find it to be better. But when I was talking to this customer, one of the things that I showed off, and OneNote does this, but it didn't do it as well, which is kind of what led me to finally do the thing, the proselytizing, is inside of OneNote, if you have an image, you can right-click on it and capture text or OCR or something. And she had taken a screenshot of some PowerShell, which is another thing they're talking about in the chat room. And I'm like, okay, well, let's run that command again. And she's like, oh, I don't have the command. I just have the screenshot of the command. And I'm in Snagit mode. I'm like, oh yeah, just pull the text out of it. And we were trying to do it in OneNote. We just couldn't get it to come out in a way that made sense. And I'm like, Snagit does that. And so Snagit editor for the last 2 or 3 versions has had a capture text option. So if you take a screenshot of text, you can add a button or you can right click and capture text, and it works amazing. I use that all the time. I use it most days of the week, I think.
Yeah, no, we definitely can't say enough nice things about Snagit. Drew also points out that Snagit you can use that to make GIFs, so little animated images, and so that's one of those things I wish I did a better job of, like with my tweets. I think I should do a better job, like promoting videos by creating a 10-second GIF of kind of a main function or something. So I've done some of that. I really wish I would do it more because I think it is a super valuable learning tool that I don't use enough.
I've never thought of it because I do most of my snagiting with images and not video. So yeah, I just always forget that GIF option is there.
Yeah, well, and that's so for example, your blog post would be a great option. Like if you had to say one, like where you're like, all right, right click on this and then pull the drop down and fly, right, like a multi-step like that. You could you hit with Snagit, you say, capture video instead of capture the image, and then it'll capture that video, and then you take that, and it gives you a little mini player inside of Snagit that you can then chop that up into shorter sequences. But so now on your blog post, you show that 4-step hover click, right click, hold your tongue sideways, instead of having a static picture of the screen when you were done clicking all those buttons.
I like where you're going to this. So the follow-up to my how to use PowerShell with Office 365 and multiple identities without losing your damn mind, the follow-up for that has a couple of places where there's a menu that you need to go. I will try this. Try this.
It's slightly frustrating the first time.
Oh, I love being frustrated. So that's good.
I know, but I just want to set expectations that the first time you do it, you'll be like, nah! But once you kind of get the swing of it, it's a pretty neat way to really, take a blog post as a great medium for that and enhance what you're doing.
Yep. And Mark also brings up that the OneNote for web articles, there's some great stuff there. And like on my phone, I can share stuff to OneNote. Yeah, I love OneNote. Love it to death. For snapping pictures and stuff, I find Snagit to be a superior tool. So I wanted to give those guys a shout and hopefully make a couple of people's lives better with that.
All right, so speaking of lives being better, if we kind of jump back over into the SharePoint Online world, this is more of an open-ended conversation, but I hadn't had a chance because, like you said, I've been ignoring you because I've been busy.
You have been.
Big air quotes there.
Busy.
But one of the things I've ran into 3, maybe 4 different customers in the last couple of weeks has been SharePoint workflows not working. And it's kind of like they're like, hey, this thing's always worked, but now it doesn't, or I'm migrating, I'm trying to figure out. It just seems to be like maybe the fact that, and I explained it to a customer the other day, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I think for the default for people, it is if you want to create workflows on SharePoint 2016, you use SharePoint Designer 2013 and create SharePoint 2010 workflows, right? And so having to like explain this to a customer felt really awkward.
Yep.
But what I'm seeing is that some of these SharePoint Designer actions are just a little more grumpy than they used to be. So I don't know if it's just finally, that it's 8 years after the workflow engine was first built. It's finally just worn itself out, kind of like a wireless access point like we talked about a few weeks ago. But, I know that we had the .NET issue for the workflows.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
On-prem and breaking some things. But this has been even in SharePoint Online, just simple workflow things just not firing the right way. So I don't know. Have you been running into any of this? You've seen anything like this?
Not online, but that makes me wonder. I mean, we know online is just Windows servers in the background. I wonder if there's some of that .NET patching on some of those Windows servers. They just haven't gotten around to fixing it.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely could be. And the other one, I'm trying to think. And one of them was, we just had to we just tore the workflow down and put it back together, and it fixed it. Like we rebooted the workflow, and so I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there and see if any of the listeners were running into that, so that if they're going insane like some of my customers are, they can know should be a support group for that. Yeah. But it just seems like SharePoint Designer workflows are getting a little tired, and then guys like me will be like, if you did it in Flow, you wouldn't have these problems. So I don't know.
Yeah, and so I think URNI's guidance is exactly the same for on-prem. SharePoint Designer 2013, making SharePoint 2010 workflows, regardless of what version of SharePoint you're on. And then in the cloud, for Office 365, similar advice, but I always start the conversation with, could you do this with Flow and with Power Apps? And then, and that's how you end up getting some dumb questions from me about stuff, because I tell people that, and they're like, oh, Flow and Power Apps, those are great bolded words. I would love to do those. Let's do that. I'm like, oh, you wanted to do, oh, well, I actually don't know how to do the thing that I just convinced you to do. So
who came up with this stupid idea?
Yeah, let me fire up Skype and get ignored by Shane. So yeah, that's I'd be curious to see if people are having that same issue. And I would guess it's a .NET issue on the back end of Office 365, because we know architecturally they have these pods and how they upgrade stuff. So maybe that patch is just not fixed on all of them yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's not in the notes, but yeah, I definitely sometimes we have to really remember this whole pod concept, and SharePoint today might be different than SharePoint tomorrow, might be different than SharePoint an hour from now, just depending on where your instance has gotten moved at a given point in time.
Yep. That's a true story.
Yeah, and I think I've been experiencing some of this. At least I'm telling myself that's what it is. But so I'm building a Power Apps app for a construction company in the UK, and so we're using Azure SQL out of the UK, and their Power Apps instances out of the UK, and I'm just connecting to it with a browser from here.
Okay. Yep.
No big deal. Building it's all been fine. Runs well, runs fast. This morning, right before the show, actually, I was trying to test some of it, and I think what was happening was when I was doing my testing, playing the app. So instead of using the preview and the editor experience to test, but actually like running an instance of the app standalone, I think that was happening on a US-based server that was just connecting to all of their instances, right? Microsoft was trying to make it faster for me locally.
Sure, yeah.
But it was acting really weird when it came to some of the more complex SQL stuff. And so I'm thinking that I was basically just timing out with some of my crazy SQL jumping across the pond. And I'm really hopeful when he tests, he doesn't see the same issues that I did, but once again, right, it's kind of like, right, when I was in the editor experience, I was on a UK server. My SQL's on a UK server, but when I went to the play experience, I think I got moved to a US server, and I think that incorporated all my problems. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I have in the past, for various reasons that are not important to discuss, have wanted to have my web traffic look like it's coming from someplace other than where it's coming from. And there are various ways to do that. So if you keep with this stuff, we may have to talk about what some of those options are so that you can better control where your egress point is. Yeah,
no, I definitely, like I think we've talked about before, so we've got the UK, we've got Switzerland, we've got Australia, New Zealand. I mean, Power Apps is very international. Us Americans, we're behind. We need to catch up.
And that brings up another thing when you mentioned this. Is the Is the terminology for the thing that you build more correctly a Power Apps app or a Power App?
It is a Power Apps app. And for a long time, the marketing team was militant that you had to call it a Power Apps app. So they have trained me well, but they have finally given up, and they now will accept without correcting you or smacking you if you call it a Power App.
Mm-hmm.
But the correct, if we're going to get LCA involved, it is a Power Apps app.
God, don't get LCA involved. Yeah, that is confusing because because if you create a flow, is it a flow or is it a flow or a flow app or?
So you use Microsoft Flow with a capital F to create flows with a lowercase f.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know why you have a hard time with
No,
this.
I can't imagine. That's one of those things obvious to everybody but me. Yeah.
I mean, we should have a conversation about licensing too. I mean, just point out other obvious things. I don't know why Todd can't wrap his head around it.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Because I've been talking to people at that, and I talk about how people should move to that, but I never know what to call the thing that I'm telling them they should build. Is it you should build a Power App or you should build a Power Apps app?
Power Apps app is the most correct. I know you're always a big fan of the most correct way of saying things.
I have come around on that. I think you'd be proud of me. So for backstory for those of you, lots of backstory. When Shane and I started at Rackspace 100 years ago, they made us take the Gallup Poll Strengths Finder thing. I think everybody should take it.
Yes.
I thought it was dumb when they told us to do it. I hated every second of it. I got the response back and I'm like, oh my God, that explains a lot. Like that makes a lot of sense. When I got the results, I became a believer immediately. And then I showed it to my wife and they're like, yes, she's a gold star for them. But anyway, my number one strength was discipline, which sadly does not mean that I have discipline, which would be tremendous if that's what that meant. But what it means is that I like things to be structured and follow rules and all of that. The polar opposite of discipline is adaptability, which means going with the flow, which I cannot do. But so an extension of that is when it comes to English and language and all of that, I learned rules about grammar when I was in 11th grade in high school, and anything that deviates from that even a little bit is horrible and I hate it. And so Shane and I have had these conversations for decades now about that, how that's the case. And so I've started listening to a bunch of different language podcasts, and I've come around. Language changes. It's a good thing. So.
Yeah. You just kind of like did the precursor to if we ever go to couples therapy, right? That'd be like a month of sessions right there. Is this whole difference that we have, right? Because so like Todd, for example, right, 100% discipline, right? He's as far on that end of the scale as you can. I am 100% on adaptability. I can't stand to have structure. I want to make up everything as I go right freaking now. And
no planning ahead. No, just we jump into it and make it work. Yep.
And there's so much of that. And what was funny about those, because, going into them, I was like, I super nerded out on them. And it turns out that one of my top strengths is maximizer. And one of the attributes of people that are maximizers, like one of the, I don't want to call it side effects, but one of the things about them is they love strengths. And I'm like, how did you know? It was kind of fun.
Yeah, and I was on site at a customer last week, and they'd all taken that. And I'm like, this is good stuff. And you mentioned that you and I are polar opposites. And Graham Weston, one of the, I don't know if you want to call him founder of Rackspace, but one of the guys that started out, that was one of his babies. And the idea was not to figure out what you're bad at and get better at it. It was to find out what you're good at and find somebody who's good at the other stuff and then work together. And so I think while you and I being on opposite ends of that scale is maddening to both of us all of the time, I think the combination of coming at problems from both directions is part of our success. So it's horrible and great all at the same time.
Yeah, I completely agree, right? And there was two other things I took out of that, right? So one of the big upsides is that you need to understand that your strengths are kind of like what recharges you, right? That's the thing that helps you reset. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting concept. The other thing that came out of that was, I lost it. Oh, I had such a good point.
I'll expand on that one. Hopefully you'll come back to it. So A few years ago, there was a TV show called The Unit, which was about Delta Force, and it was based on a book written by one of the guys that founded Delta Force. And so I read the book, and he was talking about, Delta Force is an elite group in the Army, and when they were starting that out, they have these, this weeks-long trial thing where they're taking the best of the best, the Rangers and all these great people, and they're trying to figure out if they are good enough for Delta Force. And again, all great soldiers can do amazing things. And at one point in the book, they're talking about this training thing, and one aspect of the training was that the candidates had no idea what was ever going to happen next. So you go to bed Tuesday night, you have no idea what Wednesday morning is going to bring, just none. And Wednesday morning they would get up and there would be a thing on the wall that would say, here's what we're doing today. We're doing a 12-mile ruck run. We're doing whatever. Every morning was just a blank slate. And he was talking about how that weeded a lot of people out, just the not knowing. Like, these were the hardest of the hard, the toughest of the tough. They could be thrown into any situation and be successful, but just the not knowing, not having that structure weeded a bunch of them out. And I was reading that part of the book, and I read this book 15 years ago. I was reading that, I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally get that. I totally get that. Not that I'm anywhere near the caliber of soldier that those guys were, but I'm like, I absolutely just the not knowing would drive me crazy. And I find out years later it's because I don't have that adaptability. I'm on the other end. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other big one, thank you for that time sink there.
Did it jiggle free the second thing? That's what I was trying to.
It did. It was perfect. But the other one was with the strengths finders. What you do is you learn to work with people.
Yes.
Right? So for example, if I go to Todd and I want to get work out of him, I want to do, I need an end goal. I need something solved. If I can understand that Todd has discipline, if I go to Todd with, here's the 7 bullet points that we need to do to achieve this plan. Here's the strategy, right? Todd's a lot more likely to buy in than if you show up and say, hey, Todd, let's just get this thing done.
Yep.
And so one of the big things at that particular company was everyone on their desk had their name cards had their 5 or 10 strengths, so that when you went to interact with them, you could learn to interact with them.
Yep.
And so to that point, Mark Crispin in the chat room was asking, hey, is it worth $50 out of my own pocket to do? Well, as a guy who is a maximizer who loves this stuff, of course it is. But I think really to take advantage of it, you want to get into a scenario where your whole team, your working set has done it.
Yeah.
That's where you're really going to see the benefits of everyone spending $50. And then you can get into these special classes like strengths for teams. That then someone comes in and facilitates a conversation to help you guys learn to work together. It's really good. It's a neat way to kind of look at the world.
Yeah, and I think we didn't get the whole thing that they offered, but we got our strengths. We could see everybody else's strengths, and then we got like maybe half an hour or an hour on the methodology of it. And I think that whole piece is as important, because getting the things back told me a bunch about myself. But then in that hour, they talked about how, if you have discipline and you are working with somebody who's got adaptability, just know that, so your example is great. And this happens all the time. So for instance, when I was talking to Mark Rackley about the North American Collaboration Summit, I need structure. I need discipline. And he's like, yeah, submit some stuff. And I'm like, what kind of stuff? What areas? And he's like, whatever. I'm like, no, I need like point me in the direction. Give me a couple of things. And once he did that, we were off to the races, which I know with you is completely the opposite. We're like, submit some stuff. And you're like, and you just, you go, you like having that open air. I need some guide rails. But yeah, it's infinitely helpful. I think for teams, it's great stuff.
Yeah. And the last crazy one, and we'll stop talking about this because this was not on the agenda, but this is fun.
Not even close.
Is you also start to, if you're smart, right? 'Cause they don't teach it, but you can learn the negatives of the different strengths.
Yeah.
So, and my favorite example of that is people who have positivity, right? You're like, that is a great strength, right? Who doesn't want a positive person, their dog just got ran over, they, lost their job and all this, and they're just as happy as can be, like, yeah, the sun will come out tomorrow, I'll get a better job, and I'll get 2 dogs, and right, those type of people, you're like, that's a great strength, I wish I had it. The downside of people with positivity is that they can never understand, or they don't ever see fault in the things they do. Yeah. So as a manager of someone with positivity, if you're like, hey, look, Johnny, you did a terrible job on that project. You know, you're late, you're behind, the customer's mad, the world is on fire because you didn't do what you were supposed to in a timely fashion. What they hear is, oh, I'm kind of important here. The world needs me. You know, this is really great. I'm so happy. And they don't take the credit. They don't improve. They have a hard time getting better because they can't fathom that they ever did anything wrong because everything you say is just this hyper positivity thing. Like it's remember Rules of Engagement? David Spade's character, right? No matter what someone said to him, he said, so you're saying I got to change?
Yeah, yep. Completely impervious. Yep.
So anyway.
Yeah, big fan of that. I talked it up enough that my wife had her team do it, and it was, yeah, good stuff.
All right, let's jump into the community corner here and call it a day.
All right, so you were supposed to add something to the notes. You put that note in last week's notes, and it referenced this next week, which is this week.
Yep, I guess it means next week.
All right, okay. So yeah, a bunch of stuff. We've had so a couple of folks that are in the chat room a lot. Kyle and Eric sent us stuff about presenting at their user group, and I think we're on board for doing that. So I think I'm doing January, and I don't remember when you're doing. But yeah, if you're listening to this, if you want Shane or I to pop into your user group, give us a shout. Or if you just want us to chat up your user group and tell people where it's at and how to get in there and all that, let us know. You can email us. I'm Todd at toddclint.com, at Todd Clint on various social media outlets. But we want to help the community. We want to support that stuff. So give us a shout.
Definitely. Todd and I have never met a microphone we didn't like, just so we're all on the same page of...
Yep. So I guess you did your PowerShell or your Power Apps and Flow user group. Is that still going strong?
Yeah, we had a great first meeting. We had a whole bunch of people, and we're hopeful. I think we have a date for the next one, but I do not know it. But yeah, if you're in the Cincinnati area, hit me up and remind me to get you a date on when the next session is, because we're excited to grow and do. And we're going to try and start at the beginning, right? So we're going the next talk is going to be like Flow and Power Apps 101 stuff. So if you're like, man, I really want to kind of start getting into this, but I don't know what's going on, we got your back. So
all right. You're doing some Power Apps and Flow training. Tell the nice folks about that.
Yep. So tomorrow we launch our first class. Will be like a 3 or 4 hour class on Power Apps 101 and Flow 101. So that one's to get people that have no idea what's going on up to speed enough so that really you can take the class that goes next week, Monday through Thursday, which is going to be Power Apps and Flow for people who, you built a Power App, you built a Flow, but you really don't know what you're doing, right? I mean, that's probably oversimplifying it. But the idea is to take those concepts, those buttons you figured out how to press, and make you understand how you press those buttons in the right order to get better results, and how that crazy formula that you wrote, what does it really mean, and that type of stuff. So trying to help people bridge the gap from I figured out a bunch of stuff on my own to I actually have got a solid foundation.
Yeah, valuable stuff. Always beginners out there to train, but always folks that need to go that next level. So
yeah, and my next level is it's like a 150, maybe it's a 200 level, right? It's definitely not the nerd out class that I really would like to write.
Yeah. So then, I mentioned this earlier, a month from now, I'm going to be in Ljubljana, Slovenia at the Thrive conference, and then heading over to Zagreb to see the SysKit folks. If you're in Europe, please come join me on Monday, December 3rd. I'm teaching an all-day admin class, and then the conference itself is the 4th and the 5th. So go to thriveconf.com, sign up for that. I would love to see you there. And then next year's already filling up. We're, 2 months away from the new year. You and I are going to both be at SP TechCon in Austin on February 10th through the 13th. Anything special planned for that?
Oh, I mean, that all-day Power Apps and Flow session, I think that'll be riveting again. I look forward to you coming and showing all the new skills that you have learned in Power Apps and Flow.
I am definitely the little spoon in that particular class. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, so sign up for that, sptechcon.com. All the folks are going to be there. Shane's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Lori's going to be there. It will be a good time, as it always is. And then the next month is the North American Collaboration Summit in Branson, Missouri. Shane and I will both be there doing Power Apps and Flow and all that kind of stuff. You can go to collabsummit.org and sign up for that. We would love to see you there.
Yeah, another chance to take an all-day Power Apps and Flow class. And I hear that my class is wildly so popular. It is leading the registrations. So I
My
don't want to.
Goodness. I can only imagine your pride. That's yeah. So that will be a good one. And then a couple of months after that, in 6 months, is the SharePoint conference in Vegas, May 21st through the 23rd.
Goodness, we are busy people.
It is, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a couple other ones that I'm looking at. You might have something else going on. We still got to figure that all out.
Yep.
Busy stuff. So we would love to see you guys if you're at a conference that we're at. Goodness sakes, we're both incredibly friendly folks. So come on up, introduce yourself. We'd love to chat with folks. Shane looks a little grumpy, but once you come up, give him a hug. He warms right up to you. So
I like hugs. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, he's the hug monkey.
Yeah, and the other one that I forgot was the online free flow conference. So December 12th. From 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So there'll be 8 30-minute sessions from different flow people, MVPs and community members and product team people. So pretty exciting little conference. If you want to kind of see flow, whether there's some of the beginner sessions or some of the super nerdy sessions, I think it'll just be a fun one to check out once we, hopefully here in the next couple of days, they get the schedule out of who's presenting so you can kind of start to plan around that.
Excellent. Free flow training December 12th. I like it. All the links for this will be in the show notes, toddclient.com/podcast409. Find all the stuff there. Well, you're a busy guy. You need to get going. We've run these people horribly late, so I need to apologize to them for that. But you will be gone next week, but I will see if I can bring somebody in to fill your big clown shoes.
Oh, very cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
And Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays, joyous Hanukkah, all that stuff.
See ya.
Yep.